contact points between your feet and the floor and the shoes if you're wearing them, or socks, or if you're in the luxury of bare feet, just wiggle your toes. And try and listen to your feet. Feel into your feet. Now you can just open your eyes. That was an experience of focused attention or mindfulness. And that's the way we'll start today, by feeling grounded, by noticing that we're embodied creatures, that our bodies are not just transportation devices for our heads. They're very, very important. It's very important to tune into the wholeness of yourself. We're often quite disconnected. By feeling into your feet, you've experienced some mindfulness. I'm going to give a little presentation, and this is to kind of help with our process today. And as you know, this is January, and it's always a great time to reflect and start and begin to think about the year that's passed and what's coming at us, I suppose. But it is a new year, but is it just that we are the same? Who knows? Some wisdoms. Alan Watts was a great philosopher, and he talks about mindfulness in a way that can be useful. The idea of being able to feel into life rather than thinking about life, being in it. Attention is an aspect of mindfulness. And as I said earlier, where your mind goes, your body flows, but also where our eyes go, we tend to pay attention to that. But intention comes from a deeper space, and that's where your heart is focused. And finally, we are all lost in thought, and we're always thinking. And the Buddha, thousands of years ago, said this, and I think this speaks to our power to create our present moment by being fully present. So at the beginning of this, I would like very much for us to just pause for a moment and set an intention for this time together today. Thank you for giving me your precious time. And also I want to thank the Dementia Society for inviting me to give this talk to you today. As you know, the Dementia Society is an Ottawa-based organization that focuses on the basic tenet that no one should have to face dementia alone. That's a key message, because aloneness is really frightening to us, because we are social beings. And the Dementia Society does its best and has pivoted through this pandemic to continue to support caregivers and people who are affected by dementia. And so it's a very wonderful organization, and I'm privileged to be on the board and doing my little bit. Now, this is a scene that's local, and it's an indicator to just again pause. You've formed your intention, or you can form your intention after this little meditation. I'm going to try and pepper my talk with some little experiences, brief experiences of meditation, so that you can drop in and out and hopefully not get too much caught up into thinking. Now, for this exercise, I'd like us to focus on the breath. The breath is always there as a resource, and it's often used as a focal point for Vipassana meditation, which is attention training focused meditation. The breath is so uniquely resourced to help us because it's tuned in and hooked into the relaxation response in the brain. So when we focus on the breath, or when we pay attention to what is an unconscious natural process, we can, in a way, take charge of how our brain is being driven. Our brain is like a fantastic sports car, but we don't know how to operate it. We don't know what's under the hood, basically, and we barely know how to drive it. So if you can think about that in context of your own life and understand that you're uniquely equipped to actually tune in and pay attention to what's happening inside, especially if you use a focal point, and the breath is commonly used. So basically start where you are. You're in your home or wherever you are. You could be even on the bathroom. It doesn't matter. Nobody knows. This is your breath, your private experience. You can be unhealthy, you can be angry, you can be anything. But the only requirement is that you can breathe. So simply close your eyes now and bring your attention to the breath in your body. And focus on the breath moving in and out. And there are three main areas that we notice our breath. It's in the nostrils, in the chest, or in the belly. I urge you to focus on the belly and soften as you welcome the breath into your body. Breathing in, breathing out. Just for a moment, see if you can follow your breath from the point of entry at the nostrils all the way down into your throat, into your lungs, allowing your belly to balloon. And then on the way out, just yielding and softening as it says goodbye. Congratulations. You've just had your, maybe a meditative moment. Maybe not your first, but I hope it won't be your last. So what is mindfulness? Well, mindfulness is living moment by moment in awareness. And it's about observing our thoughts, our sensations, and our emotions. The mind is always chattering along. But when you develop a capacity to notice what's happening, to observe what's happening, you're stepping into a possibility of not being hugely reactive. And also a key part of mindfulness is by observing without judgment. That's really hard because we are so entrained in judgment. We struggle with evaluation. We've been examined from the moment we were born. We're always setting ourselves goals. But in this moment of mindfulness, there is no judgment. There's just observing. And this is a huge gift, that capacity to observe what is arising, rather than ignoring it or being lost on what they call autopilot. That's where, you're lost in thought. The day goes by and you don't know what you've done because you haven't really dropped into the moment. And when you do drop into the moment, your mind is so appreciative because the brain really responds to moments of quiet. Normally in our lives, we're like a cat on a hot tin roof. We're hopping around, going from stimulus to reaction, trying to get comfortable, trying to get happy, trying not to worry. But the process of inserting mindfulness into our normal way of being allows us to going from, noticing what's happening. Oh, that feels hot. That feels hot. And then choosing how to respond. Now, the logical thing is to move away from something that's painful and to try and seek pleasure. But sometimes if we can just observe what is actually happening, we can decide in terms of our responses. Sometimes it's important to notice this doesn't feel right, and not ignoring it, not dulling it, asking myself, how am I going to respond to this? That is truly often a wise approach. However, most of us are so reactive because we live in a world that is somewhat overstimulated, overcharged, too much information, little regulation of what's being told to us, except it's fear-inducing. And this is the current state of affairs, and I think it's always been the state of affairs. Because I often think that people who can control our fear buttons control us. But the benefits of mindfulness are enormous. Literally, they've done research on brains of experienced meditators, and gray matter changes, and we grow more brain cells. The gray matter is where the brain cells are located, and it's very true that we can actually regulate aspects of aging by reducing stress, because stress tends to prune brain cells. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind, indeed. Why is that? Well, it's because of the negative valence in our minds. We are sort of wired to try and keep ourselves safe, to try to always avoid, as I said, difficult situations. However, when our mind is wandering, we're tending to go down old paths, often negative ones, rather than choosing what path we're going to be on. And indeed, the last statement is true. It's kind of like, if you don't know what your child is up to, chances they're up to no good. I think it's the same with our minds. If we don't know what's going on inside, likely we are dwelling in regret, fear. We tend to be lost in the past. And it's been shown that people who are happier tend to, when they meditate, go into more forward planning thinking rather than being stuck in the past. I find that quite interesting. But when we're always ruminating, chewing over old stuff, we tend to reinforce that negative valence or negative tendency in our minds. And of course, there are many benefits and validated benefits. There's a definite reduction in stress when we practice mindfulness. And stress is mediated through the limbic system, which is the deep brain. And it produces certain neurochemicals that are actually problematic for our regulation. For example, cortisol causes our blood pressure to go up, our gut to be more irritable. It causes pruning in areas of the brain associated with memory, such as in areas like the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain where memory is consolidated. Fortunately, when we reduce stress, the brain does respond by healing and recovering. And I think that's really important to note. Again, depression, well, I often say to people that, I work as a psychiatrist, that depression is reinforced by thought spirals and emotional spirals. And if one can notice those thoughts and emotions, one can possibly interrupt those processes. The same with anxiety. The old saying is, you get on the elevator to go down, but you don't have to go to the basement. It's about catching those worries, about catching those negative thoughts. Also pain. Pain is felt in the brain. Pain is a brain phenomenon that, again, we can quiet and, again, not be in the pain. that whole idea of being in the thought or in the emotion. And of course, finally, sleep. Going to bed at night, again, choosing to do so mindfully rather than just going through your catalogue of worries last thing. It's important to see how you can manage that. So I just put this in because, you know, I'm fundamentally fascinated by the brain. And, you know, I barely got through neuroanatomy because the guy who was teaching me, it was a continuous assessment at that time. And I sort of had passed the year by the time it came around to the springtime, and it was great weather, so I didn't study at all. And I remember the guy saying to me, "You're not going to become a neurosurgeon, I hope." And I said, "Well, no," but I didn't realize I'd become a psychiatrist. But anyway, the brain is this. It's a whole load of amazing fat and jelly, and it consumes a lot of energy. But our reactive part of our brains are really mediated deep inside the brain. They're the older brain, and it's underneath the parietal lobe here. And this is the reactive part. This is part that is wired for touch, for sensation, for motor function, for vision. The prefrontal cortex here, this is the part that evolved last. And this is the part that is able to help us with higher thoughts, higher functioning, reason, ideals, creativity, etc. But when we're in reactive mode, we tend to be working with the older part of the brain, and we're not actually functioning as well from our higher selves. Here we are again. This is a scene from an area very close to my heart, but it's a place that I just love to have you think about. The green fields of Ireland. Again, let's have a little break. Too much talk. So notice again how you're sitting. Begin to drop into your body and try to again ground yourself by paying attention to your feet, your belly. Notice how you're held by the chair you're sitting on. And if you're comfortable, please allow your sense of sight to rest by closing your eyes. Try to put aside all distractions and intrusions. And again, bring your attention back to the breath, be it at your nose, back of your throat, your chest, or your belly. Noticing perhaps how the breath massages the inside of your body. How the body receives the breath. In and out. And perhaps when thoughts arise or sensations arise, just notice and bring yourself back to the breath. There it goes again. Just return to the breath. No right or wrong. Letting all the shoulds and the obligations fall off your shoulders. You're just here now. Now just gently open your eyes and thank yourself. You've just given yourself the gift of another meditation, another experience of mindfulness. As you go through your day, it can be helpful just to have those moments. And sometimes I like to have certain reminders that make me aware that I need to practice mindfulness. It's a practice. It's never perfect. Our minds have the attention span that's probably shorter than the goldfish now because we're so distracted. But when we just stop for a moment, it's very, very helpful to just see how you can soothe yourself and notice this is where I am right now. I'm not 5 minutes ahead or 5 years ago. You're right here. And cues for me are sometimes when my phone rings, rather than running to get it, just pause. Just pause for a moment, just stop. Or when you're making a cup of tea, before you take that first sip, just notice perhaps the sensation of the tea, the smell, the warmth, and just allow yourself to be with that moment. How often are you like myself where you've drank a cup of tea and you don't even remember the whole process of drinking it? It's about savoring. It's about appreciating. It's about being aware. This is an interesting little old research done by a guy called Davidson at the University of Wisconsin. Brilliant man. He's got a great book on the emotions and understanding the emotional states. But he did an interesting project where he injected people with the flu vaccine. And now we're all talking about vaccines these days. But some people were trained in mindfulness, and then others were just the controls. They didn't get the benefit of the training, life as usual, as they say. And at the end of the training, when they measured the titers, which is the antibodies, we all know about antibodies now in our world. The antibody titers were significantly higher in the meditation group, which means their immune system was more robust. Their immune system was able to do the work of forming a good immune shield by the virtue of the fact that they were less stressed, they were more mindful, they were better able to regulate their inner world as much as how they responded to their outer world. And this research is old, but it has been replicated, and I find it interesting. I really like this quote from Einstein. He's always quoted, and maybe he didn't say half the things he said, but I think I picked it because I want to really talk a bit more about judgment, because Einstein was very curious, he says, and I think curiosity is a secret super weapon at dealing with judgment. It's sort of like when you notice, for example, that you're criticizing yourself, or you're getting on your high horse about something, or you're angry about something, and people nowadays are quite reactive. It's interesting to bring curiosity to that, to really observe and say, well, why am I thinking that way? What's this about? And it's really impossible to be judgmental and curious at the same time. So that's a useful thing to cultivate. And I must say that, if you take lessons from younger people, children, they're always asking questions. Why is this? Why is this? And that's an important ability because they're learning. They're open. They're not closed off. Judgment implies decisions. This is the way it is. It's not going to change. And of course, fat chance, because it's always changing. But, at least I suppose you think you've, put your stake in the ground and you're going to be certain about something. Well, let me tell you something. There's nothing that's certain. Now, this is another little pause, and I want to stop screen sharing for a moment so you can see this particular meditation practice. Let's see. So this is the 5-finger breathing technique. This was developed for children because our hands are beautifully wired. We have great innervation in our hands. Our hands do so much. We take them for granted. But the meditation technique is using the hand as a guide. Many of you may know this at this point. I'm not sure, but you may have heard of this technique. It's very useful for children, and it's useful for somebody, if somebody in your environment is agitated or stressed. And it involves touch, and you can do it for yourself, and it's a beautiful practice. So this is the way it goes. It's basically tracing the outline of your hand with your finger. I want you to do this now. It may feel a little bit funny, isn't it ticklish? But anyway, as you go up your thumb, breathe in. And then slowly go up and down and breathe out. And up the index finger, breathing in. And around and down and breathe out. Breathing up the middle finger. And closing your eyes and just drop into the sensation of doing this and breathing out as you're going down. Up and down. In and out. And let's do it with the other now. And I will say nothing, and you can just do this yourself and just drop into the silence of your own thoughts as you tune in to breathing using your hand and just closing your eyes. And I enjoyed that anyway. It was very useful. It got me really very much focused on the process of breathing in and out. And also it reminded me to have some more guides for mindfulness. For example, if you're taking a shower, just try to observe the sensation of the water on your skin. Your skin is the mother of all. It's the largest organ, and it is also so innervated. And touch is the mother of all sensations. And we're somewhat touch deprived. So, for example, when we're in the shower, we can tune into our sense of touch. And also when we're applying lotion, for example, doing it tenderly, doing it lovingly to yourself. Again, getting away from that tendency to be so hard on yourself. slapping it on or not even doing it. It's just to just mindfully do that. And it's a great comfort. It's a great way of soothing oneself. The whole system, our autonomic nervous system, is wired to want to either be in reactive mode or in resting mode. And in our world, we tend to be more reactive. So the idea is to try to bring up the resting mode more, to reinforce the autonomic nervous system. So that little meditation practice is useful. Simply bringing your hand to the side of your face and closing your eyes and taking one mindful breath is also useful. Touching the side of holding yourself here at the side of your shoulder here. And just again, dropping into the breath. These are all ways of down-regulating and lowering our stress level, which is very, very key. So components of mindfulness include basically being aware that life is tough and we have a great desire to heal. I often say that most people go into healthcare in general to heal themselves first. Make no bones about it. And through that process of healing others, they perhaps begin to develop some capacity for self-compassion and healing themselves. Being kind, again, about being patient and being aware that we're all human and we all make mistakes. Failings are part of being human. There's none of us, anybody who has never made a mistake in their lives. And how do we forgive ourselves? Have you ever come home from some event and maybe even after this, I'll think to myself, should have said that, should have said this and that. I will laugh and I will think about you all and say, well, you know, I'm sure that they'll forgive me for forgetting that because they don't know that I forgot to tell them, for example. It's just important to get out of that tendency to reflect on what's gone, the past is over, and about being compassionate with ourselves. That's feeling into our own state and recognizing that we are all connected. Forgiveness is truly divine. Now, I put this slide here. It's a long, wordy slide, but it's sort of to talk about a bit about what's happening in our world. We're going through some dramatic times, and people may hear anything can happen anytime and think that that's depressing. But really, if you understand that the world is kind of random, it's freeing, because I think in our world today, we're often tending to judge ourselves because something bad happens. We sort of feel we should live curated lives of perfection, where we should be having this experience and that experience. That's fine. But, you know, life is not easy and life is random and it's uncertain. And it's kind of okay to actually say this is the way it is, because we can only do the best that we can, and we can let go of fear. Because fear just keeps us in a state of overdrive and stress, and it's not helpful at this juncture. I put this one here to remind me to say that it's okay to develop some little saying about oneself that it reinforces compassion. My saying is simply, well, there I go again. Or I do laugh sometimes because I like to talk, and they used to say that, you know, I was vaccinated with a gramophone needle. Does anybody know what a gramophone needle is? Well, it shows my age, but I think sometimes when I hear myself yattering on, I say, oh, there you go, vaccinated with the old gramophone needle. It's about, Christian Neff is the woman who is absolutely the queen of self-compassion. She and Christopher Germer have done a lot of work in this area. And I'm going to develop a little resource page at the end of this and get Ashley to send it out to you all if you want to look further into some of the people I'm referring to. Now, this is a wonderful acronym that I came across through my dear friend Bev Patwell, who's on this call. One of the greatest things about the COVID pandemic was that Bev and I got closer and we were able to do some more work together around grief and COVID, etc. But this particular acronym is simple, and it's a useful little tool for really understanding how we get through this time. And the C stands for connect, and it also stands, I think, for communicate. So think about who you want to connect with in life, who you haven't talked to for a while, who you need maybe to forgive. Just reach out and connect. That's C. A is adapt. We've had to adapt, and we're very adaptive. And in many ways, I remember at the early days how panicked we all were. The level of that panic is less. And when this pandemic ends, and it will end, it's not going to go on forever, we will have developed so many new adaptive routines. Routine is key. We need structure, we need predictability. That's where setting aside some time for reflection and meditation. Start with 5 minutes. Start with one breath. You've given yourself a gift. The brain responds in 18 seconds to being mindful. And don't feel necessarily that a lot of people say they can't meditate or they can't do this and that. You can focus on your breath, one breath, and begin there. And exercise is another vital piece. And that's one of the routines I've been able to establish, which I think has made a difference. Exercise, however you do it, whether it's going for a short walk around your apartment, getting outside, doing something like this on a regular basis makes all the difference. So these are some of the routines that may help us. Meditation, well, this is what we're doing here. Developing mindfulness. Gratitude. Again, gratitude, it's really hard to feel deprived or annoyed or lacking when we operate from gratitude, when we begin to appreciate all the aspects of our world that sustain us and keep us going. Move, eat well, and sleep. Connect, laughter. There's a very good video by Judson Brewer. I put it there and I will send you the link later. But laughter and humor, we all have a capacity for humor, and it's incredibly important. Now, I wanted to just talk a little bit, since it is this time of year, about setting goals. So basically, we fall into some of these tendencies. This is by Gretchen Rubin. There's the people who are upholders, who are very disciplined. The questioners are always questioning everything, and until they get a good answer, they tend to find it hard to commit to anything. The rebel tends to find it hard to acknowledge what is expected of them and to actually, inside or out, to do anything for themselves. We all know one or two people like that. And the obliger is the most common type of tendency in humanity. I'm an obliger. For example, I have a dog, and I know the dog has to be walked. So I will walk for the dog necessarily, but I won't walk for myself. So I want you to think about, who are you grateful to? What have you learned in the last year? What have you really succeeded with? And then what type of nature have you? And then just think of one thing you'd like to do going forward. And after this talk, please write it down and then chop it up into little halves and start doing half of what you set as a goal. That is probably a good way to begin the process of achieving some of our New Year's resolutions. This is a very useful way of being happy. When you wake up in the morning, bring 5 people to mind that you're grateful for. When you greet your family for the first time each day, imagine they're long-lost friends, and you don't have to improve them. And then as you're walking through your day, when you see somebody, don't think about, are they keeping their physical distance? Because they probably are. Just say it silently, I wish you well. You're getting into transmission mode. Finally, we're all going to go this way. And this is about humor. It's about waking up and really looking at the life you have. Unfortunately, we're so driven to distraction by our devices now, we often miss out on life. And finally, I love this quote from Oscar Wilde, one of his last statements, I believe. It shows his humor even in the face of loss, even in the face of the end of it all. In conclusion, Socrates said, the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And the new starts in the present moment. It starts right now. Thank you very, very much for your attention.